Hi everyone. What I wanted to try to explain real quick about what I had discovered back in 2009 is how the prophecy in the book of Daniel actually works out in Jubilee years when you go backwards from this year that we're in right now. But of course I had discovered this back in 2009 and I didn't know anything about the pattern back then. I had just come up with these years based on basically the Alexander prophecy, which is something that I talked about in this video right here, the original video that I did that's titled Why I Believe the True Jubilee Year is 5777, and it's 4 parts, and it's actually in parts 3 and 4 where I explained how it was the Alexander prophecy that led to my discovery that the Jubilee cycles are based on a 50-year cycle. And I explain how this solves the dilemma of the 2300 days that are mentioned in Daniel 8. And I'm not going to go back over all of this information again. You would have to watch parts 3 and 4 of this video right here to understand that. But basically what I discovered is that the Jubilees are based on a 50-year cycle, and based on that I wanted to see if the prophecy works based on Jubilees. And what I discovered is if you go back 49 Jubilees, which would be 7 sevens, that would take you to the year 434 BC. And when you go to the year 434 BC, you see that it takes you back to the time of Ezra, and to the time of Nehemiah, to the time of the building of the wall. Over here it says that Nehemiah was governor in 434 BC to 433 BC, so he was only governor for 1 year. So that takes you directly to the time of the building of the wall mentioned in Nehemiah 2. And then what I discovered is if you go back 69 Jubilees, it actually takes you to the time of Joshua's death. And at the time when I did this, I had no idea that Joshua was a type of Christ, so I was trying to find some more information about this. But the time of Joshua's death would be the cutting off of Joshua. And Joshua being a type of the Messiah, it would be the time of the cutting off of the Messiah when you go back 69 Jubilees. But since I didn't realize that at the time, I did some more searching, which is a good thing that I did that, because what I discovered is that this was also associated with the time of the retaking of Jerusalem, as you can see right here in Judges chapter 1 verse 8. It talks about Jerusalem being retaken, and this was at the time of Joshua's death. And you see this source right here which confirms that it was in 1434 was the time of Joshua's death. And then you see in this link right here that it was at the time of Joshua's death that Joseph's bones were buried. And Joseph had requested that his bones not be buried until the Israelites went into the promised land. So it was at that time that the state of Israel was formed, at the time of Joshua's death, because that's when Joseph's bones were buried, because it didn't happen until they went into the promised land. And then you see over here in the prophecy in Daniel 9:24 through 27, in verse 25 it says, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 60 weeks." So that adds up to 69 weeks. So that takes you to the restoration of Jerusalem. But it also takes you to the time of the cutting off of the Messiah, because over here it says, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. And then you see that the 49 weeks takes you to the building of the wall, which is the reason I believe the prophecy was broken down into two parts, into the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks, which would be 62 weeks and 49 weeks, or 49 years. And so when you convert that to Jubilees, it takes you exactly to the time of the building of the wall, to the time of Nehemiah. And then when you go back the full 70 weeks or 70 Jubilees, it takes you to the year 484. And you see that you have at least 3 sources here that are associating the year 1484 to the time of the Exodus, as you can see right here. And I already showed you how the year 1484 works out to 2277 BC, or to the Hebrew year 2277. But now I want to show you what the other years work out to. Okay, as you can see right here, I had come up with the year 434 BC being the time of the completion of the wall of Nehemiah. And so when you plug that date into the converter, you see that it comes up with the year 3327. So here you have the 27 is the ending. And I had come up with this date back in 2009 when I had no idea of this pattern. Then when you go back 69 Jubilees, that takes you to the year 1434 BC. And when you put that into the converter, you see that it takes you to the Hebrew year 2327. So again, you have the year 27 coming up. And then when you go back one more Jubilee from there, which would be 70 Jubilees, when you go to the year 1484 and convert that, you see that it takes you to the year 2277, which is almost like the number 27 amplified, but it also has the ending number of 77. So it has both 27 and 77 in it, which fits the pattern. Okay, so now what I want to do is talk about the importance of the number 27, first of all in the scriptures. And I had already gone over these scriptures over here that speak of the coming of the Son of Man. And it just so happens that they all seem to come up in verse 27. You see this one here in Matthew 24:27. It says, "For as lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be." And then in Luke 21:27 it says, "And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory." And then in Matthew 16:27 it says, "For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works." So as you can see, these are all coming up in verse 27. And then I had also talked about how in the book of Mark, it's over here in chapter 13, you can see that it also talks about the coming of the Son of Man in verse 27, but in this one it starts out in 26 and then goes through to verse 27. And it says, "And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, and then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the uttermost part of the earth to the uttermost part of heaven." Okay, so now what I want to do is show you some interesting things about the number 27. I actually did a little bit of research on it, and I came up with this article over here by Sandra Barr, which I thought was really interesting. And in this article, she shares a lot of information that's not necessarily about the Bible. Some of it is occultic, But I just want to focus on the things that have to do with the Bible and with Scripture. And so I'm just going to, I might mention some other things that are interesting as well, but mostly I want to stick to what has to do with the Bible. But this is interesting right here, that it takes the moon 27 days to orbit the earth. The sun revolves on its axis every 27 days. But the number 27 is actually called the Trinity of Trinities. So if there's any number that represents God more than any other number, it would be the number 3. And when you do 3 to the third power, if you multiply 3 times 3 times 3, you come up with the number 27. But when you add the 2 and the 7 together, you come up with the number 9, which is the reason that she also talks about the number 9 here. And of course, the number 9 represents judgment. Okay, so I thought this was interesting right here. There's a lot of interesting things in this article, but I'm just pointing a few out, and I'll just put the link in the description box. But over here it says the USA was created on July 4th, 1776, which is the 27th week of the year. And I thought this was really interesting because the height of the pyramid is 5,776 inches. If you were to add the capstone to the top of it, it's been estimated to be that height over there. But this year 1776 is actually a representation of the year 5776, because as it explains over here in this article, it was 4,000 years until Christ. And so the reason the Illuminati uses this year 1776 and why it's on the currency is because when you add the 4,000 years before Christ to it, it actually brings you to this year 5776, which is the year, is the height of the temple or the pyramid. And it's also the year, it was considered the year of light, and I believe this was the last full year before the return of Christ that was completed. And this also reminds me of something very significant that happened in the year 5776, actually on August 27th. And this is the exact point that the Sphinx, which points to the pyramids in Egypt, that it points to on the zodiac. It points to this space right here, right between the constellation Leo and the constellation Virgo. Right between the two is where the Sphinx is pointing on the zodiac. And as you can see, what I had discovered, and I had made a video about this, it's over here, and I'll put the link in the description box so you can see the importance of the sign that occurred on that day, but because I explain it more there. But as you can see, this seems to form a pyramid here with the constellation Coma Berenices, which seems to form the shape of a pyramid, and right beneath the pinnacle of that pyramid, right by the star, which means beautiful Lord, was this conjunction of Venus and Jupiter on August 27th. I believe that was a very important sign that occurred on that day. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next video. But another thing about the number 27 is that it represents a perfect cube, and the New Jerusalem is described as what could be construed as a perfect cube based on the measurements. But I thought this was really interesting right here. It says, in the 1977 movie Oh God, Carl Reiner put God, played by George Burns, in room 2700 on the 27th floor. So here you have the numbers of the pattern right here, the 27 and the 77. So I thought that was really amazing. But there's a lot of other really amazing things mentioned in this article. The name Adam appears 27 times in the Bible, and of course Adam is a type of Christ and represents Christ in the Bible, and he was created in Genesis 2:7. So again, you have another reference to the number 27 in connection with Christ. So I just thought this was really amazing, and I'm about out of time, so I have to continue with more in the next video. Thanks.